Rob Portman of the great state of Ohio, home to The Ohio State University. And Senator Portman is our hometown favorite. And he'll also recognize Three Dog Night because he's only a couple of years younger than me. So he grew up to Three Dog Night as well. Am I not right, Senator Portman?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Don't you feel bad for the college and high school kids who are not enjoying their graduations, their summers, their seasons of indifference to lifespan, right? When you're 18, 19 to 22?
Yeah, I do. I was supposed to speak at 4 graduations in Ohio, and we tried to do something virtual in each case, but it's just not the same. So a milestone has been missed, but it also builds character, right?
Yep.
So Hugh, they're learning that life isn't always easy street, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices.
And I think, and we'll talk about this in the second half, I think we're going to get to some opening guidelines soon. But first, I want to talk about carrying on. You had an important conversation yesterday about continuity of Senate operations and remote voting in times of crisis. This is long
Yep.
overdue. What was going on? What is your preliminary take on it?
Well, look, there are times when the Senate and the House, for that matter, cannot meet or should not meet, and we should still be doing our work. And it's everything from holding hearings, and we did one last week remotely, the first one I'm told ever in the history of the United States Senate, and it worked beautifully. It really did. But also deliberation, debate, amendments, votes. As you know, we have spent over $2 trillion now, going on three. And some of that funding, particularly in the last few weeks when we have not been in session, although we've been in technically in a pro forma session, but no members have been there. We've passed over $500 billion worth of spending with members of Congress, particularly United States senators, where I am, not being engaged and involved. So I just think we should have that as a tool in the toolbox for us to be able to work remotely, securely, and we can do that now with new technology.
I mean, if you turn to the NSA, there's got to be a way to encrypt your votes and your conversations when necessary, but also to make available to the public your public hearing, say, on a judicial nominee. Is that on the table?
Absolutely. I think it is now. The Rules Committee in the United States Senate is ready to approve hearings now. And again, ours last week went very well. They said it was the first one they had done. So I spoke yesterday to the Rules Committee chairman. I know that there are going to be a couple of committees that will meet this week remotely. Even though we're here, it's not advisable for us to be, within 6 feet of each other and so on. So members can choose to plug in remotely, and it works fine. In fact, in some respects, it works better. We had a witness from New Mexico who was out there, with the coronavirus, sort of, in isolation, self-isolation. So she did it from a pickup truck with her computer screen, and it worked just fine. We didn't have any difficulties. We used off-the-shelf technology that the Senate has. It was not encrypted because this was a public hearing. We meant it to be so. It was all, online. People could see it. So I think there's an easy way to do hearings. On the encrypted side, there's also technology to do that, of course. I mean, think about, all the financial transactions that occur around the world every day and how that's done with multiple authentications, making sure that it's the right person and making sure that the person who votes, is not under any kind of duress. There are ways to do that. And by the way, other states and governments are doing it, including the UK, including the European Union.
Now, Senator Portman, I've made no secret of my admiration for Leader McConnell. I think he's the best Republican leader that the body has had in my lifetime. But he's also very old school. I mean, if you open up the dictionary to old school, you're going to see Mitch McConnell's picture there. What does the leader think about this?
Well, he's mulling it over. I mean, he is a traditionalist, and I think that has worked well for the Senate. To stick with the traditions of being the world's greatest deliberative body, and he holds that dear. But I think he is thinking about how we can operate more efficiently and effectively. By the way, you wrote a beautiful piece about Mitch recently in terms of his role in this coronavirus and how he was able to deliver quickly on something that was positive for the American people. I appreciated that.
Well, it's deserved. I don't write these things to be noticed. I write them just to make sure people in a polarized media environment understand that there are folks who are doing the right thing for the right reasons. I think you and McConnell are two of them. Like Senator Cotton was on talking about the CCP, which we'll come to. Let me be very specific. I am so concerned about judicial nominees because California, where I used to live, is starved. I mean, there are courts that are not functioning because people like Mark Scarsi, who's had a hearing, can't get a vote. People like Rick Richmond, who's been nominated, can't get a hearing. And people like John Flynn, who's a Democrat who I think is acceptable to Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein, can't even get nominated because everything's stuck. Would the new rules apply to judicial nominees like these
Yes.
three?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Judicial nominees. How about executive nominees who are COVID-19 related? In other words, there's a job right now at the World Health Organization that needs to be filled, and Dr. Girard from HHS has been nominated, and he'd be a great pick. This is incredibly important that we have him over there at the World Health Organization representing us. So some of these picks are really important right now. And yes, you could do those by remote voting and remote debate. And, it wouldn't be any different than what we do now. Members would have the opportunity to have their voices heard. They would have the opportunity to vote, of course. And, we could move on some of these issues that are really more ministerial. They shouldn't require us to be in session so long as we have the ability to debate and be totally transparent about it. Let everybody see how you vote and why.
Now, Senator Portman, some of your colleagues on the left will be upset at the idea of judicial nominees in particular moving through. But I wonder, are they aware that what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander? It will help them if Vice President Biden wins, right? That would be
exactly.
Do they buy that argument?
Well, I think the rule of thumb in the Senate ought to be do what's right, do what's appropriate for the American people, because it's going to switch back and forth. It always has. It even has, during my tenure here in the last 10 years. So you have to be sure that what you are putting in place serves you well, but also, when you're in the minority, if you're a Republican now, or if you're a Democrat, when you're in the majority, it also serves you well. And that should be an incentive, I think, to have remote voting on occasions when we cannot or should not gather.
I hope so. And before we move to China, I just hope you'll write down those names, Scarsey, Richmond, and Flynn, and push all the We need judges in California. It's stopped. It's just absolutely stopped. Now, Senator, you used to be at the OMB. You know how much money we're spending. I mean, this is so much money that it's astonishing. But I don't think there's an alternative, is there?
Well, I think we are hitting deficit fatigue among a lot of Republicans because our annual budget is about $4.5 trillion. We spent about $3 trillion just on the COVID crisis. I think we needed to have a rescue package out there that was big. It's about 10% of GDP has been lost, and we've added about 10% of GDP in terms of our spending, actually. And so it's sort of to fill the gap, but it should be viewed as a rescue. And now we should be talking about how do you get things moving again? How do you get the economy moving for many reasons, including the health of our citizens and being sure people have the opportunity to get back to meaningful work, but also because of the revenues. We need to have tax revenues coming in. And then we also need to look at our long-term structural debt and deficit, because we haven't touched that, of course, and that continues. So we can get over this as we did, back after World War II. The same thing happened. We spent at these kinds of levels as a percent of our economy, and we were able to get over that and get back on track. But it was because we had economic growth. And because at that time, we did not have this overhang of the mandatory spending that we have now. So we've got to do both, get the economy moving again. And, the economy was hitting on all cylinders back in February, not long ago. And then second, we've got to look at the long-term structural problem with our debt and deficits.
Now, Senator, I see in the Wall Street Journal this morning, California borrowed $348 million for unemployment. Illinois borrowed a staggering $12.6 billion. And Connecticut, little Connecticut, $1.1 billion. To me, these loans, Speaker Pelosi is going to arrive at the table and say they must be forgiven. And I understand that. But if the plaintiffs bar can act like vultures on the bones of American business, we're not going to have an economy. Is that the essential deal, which is to preempt state tort law, put all these claims in one federal district, and put the standard up high?
Well, I think it can be very targeted because it's about this issue. It's about what the coronavirus has resulted in. And by the way, it's not just businesses, it's hospitals, it certainly it's nursing homes. Many people are very, very concerned about this. In fact, some businesses, smaller businesses, maybe mostly, are thinking, should I reopen with this risk because it's such a huge potential liability. So we have to address it. I think Democrats should realize that. If they're listening to their constituents back home, they're certainly hearing it. As a practical matter, everybody should want to get back to work, back to a more normal life. And to do that, we're going to have some protection.
It's like patent litigation. Put it in the Eastern District of Texas and establish some standards and because some people could be reckless. They might be liable. But let me close, Senator, before I lose you. I'm a Nixon guy, right? So I grew up hoping that China would evolve into something that we could deal with. Has your opinion, as mine has, changed of the CCP, of the PRC in the last 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, I was always skeptical, as you know, when I was the U.S. Trade Representative. I made China my number one target, and we set up a prosecutor just for China. We took him to the World Trade Organization for the first time. I mean, I've always known they were not playing fair in terms of trade, but this goes well beyond trade. You know, this goes to the supply chain issue where when you rely on China for something and you have a crisis as we've had, and it's not a reliable partner, that's a real problem. So I think that's the big difference now. We have obviously military competition. We have technology issues. As you know, we've taken the lead on this issue of trying to keep China from stealing our technology. But this is a new one. This is sort of how do we bring and reshore a lot of essential products back to this country, and I'm on board on doing that. I think we can do it through incentives. I don't think we need to mandate that businesses do one thing or another. I think we can do it in a way that helps protect us for the next pandemic, by the way, because we need to bring back some of the ability to produce things like masks and ventilators and gowns, all of which it turned out we were heavily reliant on China on. But also on the pharmaceutical side, we need to be sure that we have adequate pharmaceuticals here should we have another crisis, not necessarily a pandemic, but other issues that are healthcare related. So I think it's time to make some changes, and I think we can come up with a bipartisan way to do that continues to have a relationship with China. Many U.S. businesses, like that market over there for their products. There is some, very significant U.S. Revenue that comes from selling stuff to China as well. You can keep doing that as well, but we need to cut back on the reliance on China as a source for so many of these critical products.
Last question, Senator. At the Lincoln Memorial, the president intimated that China knew and allowed, not that they released it intentionally, but they knew it was abroad, the virus. And Senator Cotton just reiterated that they could have made a very cold, heartless decision to allow the virus spread in order to level the comparative disadvantage. Do you believe that?
We don't know yet. What we do know is it was reckless and irresponsible for China not to be transparent, because if they had been transparent, the rest of the world would have been much better prepared. Second, it was reckless and irresponsible for them to allow people from Wuhan to travel. I think those are the two things we do know, and that there's lots of blame right there, because if, again, they had either allowed everybody to know, including their own people, by the way, and the severity of the problem and what was really going on. And second, if they had not allowed people to leave Wuhan to travel to other places. Recall, this all started in one place. It all started in one place. So every single person who dies in America or elsewhere in the world, you can take it back when you're able to trace back to Wuhan. So
yeah.
Those were the two things that we know, and both of those were wrong and really unconscionable.
By the way, reckless and irresponsible, your phrase, that would make a great tort standard for a federal law preempting the states on COVID cases. Senator Rob Portman, good to talk to you as always, the great senator from Ohio. I appreciate